Well, hello there. Oh,
oh, for fuck's sake, I've done it again. Sorry.
I don't even know where to begin. All right. Well, anyway, welcome, dear listeners.
So how is it?
That's all right. Yeah. It's a bit busy, you know. That's all right. You know, I was looking forward to this.
This is just bullying. This is just Ijimeko, as the Japanese would say. I am these Welsh bullies. Anyway,
just get on with it, Nick.
All right. Not ... in ShawScope is brought to you by these two pricks and myself. The wonderful, magnanimous, and forgiving Nick Sheehan. You want to introduce yourselves, pricks?
I don't think I would care to now. No, Nick.
Evidently not.
No, there's nothing I could say at all that would enhance what you've said, Nick.
All right. So we are following on from a couple of episodes of Not in ShawScope, which themselves followed on from an episode of In ShawScope, in which we discussed all things related to Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which is... now, when we talked about Romance of the Three Kingdoms originally, did we talk about Record of the Three Kingdoms?
No, I don't think we did.
Okay. I feel like now might be the time to quickly bring up that there is something called Record.
They've read LPs, though.
Okay. All right. Yes. Record of the Three Kingdoms was written in... the 3rd century by a guy called Chen Shou, and it is basically a work of history. Then a fella called, I can't say his name properly, Luo Guanzong, came along in the 14th century, so quite a while later, and reworked it as an epic novel, a bit like a Shakespeare going back to, history and then adding more dramatic incidents, adding characters, and kind of just pumping up the whole melodrama of it. And so we're going to talk about something called Record of the Three Kingdoms, or SANGOKUSHI, parts 1, 2, and 3, which is a Japanese animated set of, I guess, theatrical films, really. Although I don't know if they were released.
Just you've brought it up, it's probably worth mentioning straight away. It's called Records of the Three Kingdoms, but it's basically Romance of the Three Kingdoms.
This is why I'm bringing this up.
Right.
Because it is by no means Record, and it's very much Romance of the Three Kingdoms. And that was made by Toei Animation. And we're going to be talking about a film which has been, I guess, recently brought to the world's attention by a guy called Sarah Senian, who did the subs and research for this, a film called HUA, TUO, and Chocho from 1983.
Who did a fucking bang-up job of that, by the way.
Yeah, absolute kudos.
And put it on YouTube.
Yes, if you look up Seijiman, spelled Seigiman, his YouTube channel, there you'll find it. Or just look up HUA, To, and Chocho.
Yeah, none of us know how to pronounce that properly.
No, no. And Chocho is spelled CAO, CAO, if that helps.
That's how they say it in the film as well.
Yeah. I just replaced How Tao with Kusohisia. And
yes. And I noticed in the Japanese version, it's pronounced so-so, just to add further confusion. So yes, is that good enough for you, Clive?
I suppose it'll do if that's the best you got.
That's all I got.
Yeah, right. So yes. So what do we?
Oh, what about me?
Well, you have been kind and a gentleman, Darren. So I don't. You're not the one attempting to cut the legs from under me, like that bully
What's that?
who is below me on my screen.
What?
I think Darren's just better at gaslighting than I am. Like,
yeah, you're a little obvious.
He's a bit more subtle.
That's why I feel more in love with him than I do with you.
But that's to be fair, we
that is gaslighting.
He's like my
that's what it is.
His technique is clearly
he's like my wingman. Basically, I upset you, I send you into his arms.
I
and
see.
He consoles you, and that turns into abuse. And then every now and again we do it the other way. This way we do it because Darren fancies you more than I do. But if it's someone else, then we reverse.
Either way, you're ending up on the game.
Yeah, it seems like it. Yeah. I'd better get some tight jeans.
Better have my money. That's all I'm saying.
I'm sure, I was going to say, I'm sure Ron is not listening, but if he was, I'm sure he would feel my pain right now.
Well, more or less the same area,
yeah, I would think so. All right, so Romance of the Three Kingdoms then.
Right.
So I watched all three of these. Are we going to start with, I assume we're going to start with the animation and then do the live action film or not?
Get your shit together, Nick.
Well, I mean, we didn't talk about this before.
Well, chronologically would be good. So what is it, 83 for the film?
That would come first, chronologically, Yep. Do you want to do the film first?
No.
Yeah, I want to do the film first because I only watched one and a bit.
Okay. Sure thing.
But I think I think the film is more of a revelation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, definitely.
So let's do the anime first.
Okay. Fuck's sake.
It's all Nick's fault because he doesn't have a firm hand.
No, it's your fault now.
It's no. I'm filling a vacuum.
You fucking gaslight me. Don't work on me, sunshine.
Anyway. So you didn't watch all the anime, right, Darren?
No, I watched something like 3 hours of it. So all of the first one and probably about 45 minutes of the second one.
I watched it all as well. But I think you get a sense of it from, I think if you've seen one, you've seen them all.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's good, I would say. It's a bit difficult for me to get overly excited, because it's a bit of a, I don't deal well with extremely extended animation series of this type. This reminds me a little bit of the kind of Japanese Euro anime co-productions that would have played on children's BBC. Seven Cities of Gold, or it's not quite exactly the same, but it's got that kind of tone which traumatized me as a child. So I have a slight hard time. I don't know why.
Why were you traumatized by Cities of Gold?
Well, I don't know. They just seemed a bit. When I was a kid, cartoons were supposed to be funny, and that's it. Like, I was a real cartoon fascist. Like, I liked Tex Avery, Roadrunner, stuff like that. And until maybe Akira came along, anything that wasn't that could fuck right off. So I didn't like fucking Willy Fogg going around the world, and Dog Tunyon and the fucking, what were they called?
Muska Hounds.
And all that stuff rubbed me the wrong way. I still watched it, because when you're a child, I watched endless amounts of TV that I didn't like.
So no sexual awakening on the cat out of Dog Tunyon and the Muska Hounds?
No.
Okay.
No. Was that an early puberty?
That's just the one of you there, Clive.
Is that so? You had feelings about the cat?
Yes, absolutely.
Nick?
Yeah. No, I'll second Darren here.
That's interesting. I didn't realize I was among the bestial.
So what about Gatchaman? I mean, you weren't a fan. I mean, I loved Battle of the Planets.
Gatchaman. Well, Battle of the Planets.
I don't remember Battle of the Planets when I was a kid.
So is that because you were too young?
Maybe because you're both like really old and decrepit, and I'm
young. Yeah. So there's about 2.5-3 years between So between us and Clive, I think, because I'm 46. How old are you, Nick?
47.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I think Clive might just have missed.
I'm 25. So yeah, this is
okay.
Okay then.
You've aged terribly. Jesus, what are you doing?
They're awfully rude.
Anyway, well, yes. You've opened that. You've opened that door. The gaslighting. It can lead to explosions. But anyway, Battle of Planets. That was solid children's entertainment. Zoltar.
Yeah. Anyway, so for whatever reason, that stuff, and even stuff like Thundercats and He-Man and like all that stuff, like I couldn't take it. See, like cartoons weren't supposed to be serious when I was it took me a while. So now I still have a slight part of that. So this is it's good, but it's very fucking long-winded. It's like 7+ hours, right? Of
it is attempting to do the whole. I mean, it is severely abridged, but it is attempting to do the whole. I mean, for me, having not actually finished the book, I think you both actually read it to the end. Yeah, I intend to now, actually, funnily enough, having seen this, because it does attempt to give you the whole breadth of, from beginning to end, of the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. And it is...
so it's good that you bring that up as well, because that's the other thing I would say. If you want to read Romance of the Three Kingdoms, I would actually recommend watching this first, because it puts the shape of it in your head. And then...
Yes, I thought so too.
It sticks more, right, when you read it.
Right down even to superimposing the little, like, Indiana Jones maps all the time to show you where people are going and what's... it gave me the shape. And so actually some of the films we watched for the last Not in ShawScope started to make more sense. And I was like, oh, now I get why this happens in the continuity of Zhuangde's life and so on. Yeah, so... but I would agree with you that the animation itself is the biggest letdown. And I think in parts 1 and 2 especially, it looks like Saturday morning cartoon fare.
That's the phrase I was looking for. Yeah.
Because it's Toei animation, and I've seen Toei animated feature films directed by the same director, right? He did some of the later Yamato, which would start.
Well, hang on now. Are you talking about the right director?
I think so, but maybe not. Let me look at my notes here for a second.
Because of the IMDb is a bit of a hash when it comes to this film, because they list it. So this is a 3-part film. 92 to 94 they came out, right? And then, and from what I understand, there was one standalone version that was dubbed into English under the title Great Conquest.
Yes.
Which Pat Morita did voices on narration for.
Yes. It was mostly dubbed by those folks who gave us, by Streamline Pictures, who gave us the first dub of Akira. So, I'd imagine a lot of it sounds like, hey, Kaneda, someone's stealing your bike.
Dude.
Right. So, yes, and I'm not sure if that version was a condensed version, or I think they just put out the first one.
No, I think it's just the first. I did find it online. It is just the first.
Right, and no one was interested, so they didn't bother with the other.
Exactly.
So the IMDb lists it as that, and then it also lists it again in 3 parts. So I went to Anime News Network for my.
Yeah, that's where I went to.
Right.
Yeah.
So there we go. You're talking about Katsumata.
Yeah.
Tomoharu, right? Whereas the IMDb lists someone called Masaharu Okuaki, who I don't think was.
I'm guessing it was Tomoharu as well. As I said, he did some of the later, space battleship Yamato movies. He did Arcadia of My Youth.
Okay, there we go.
Still very highly considered.
Yeah.
And so I've seen that animation, that Toei animation is beautiful, and it's kind of multi-layered, and the backgrounds are very well painted. This, whether because they're so long or whether there was something that's scheduling, but this looks cheap. It looks it looks like Saturday morning cartoons, and that is a block.
It looks like Filmation, not Toei.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and it looks 10 years older than it actually is.
Yep, and the character designs are also a huge failing of this. And I understand, having done a bit of research, that apparently Zhuangde's ears were in fact massive, according to. But it looks like they based the character designs a little bit on old drawings.
Yeah, well, I was going to say
scrolls and stuff.
Yes and no to them being a failure. No, in so much as they're not, just in general, the genuine level of animation isn't as high as you'd expect. But yes, they are actually quite good, just in terms of, like we were saying earlier, they're very identifiable. So they're very easy to tell the characters apart and who's who.
Apart. Okay.
So I think they did do a good job there of, like we said, making it easy to follow. So then when you decide to read, it's going to stick more than if you hadn't seen this, because then it's just a barrage of characters and names that you don't necessarily remember. Also, apparently the supervising director, whatever the fuck that means, for all films, was Toshio Masuda, the guy who directed Prophecies of Nostradamus.
Oh, okay. Yes, yeah.
And yeah, it seems to be like, so the last film he made before this, I think, like his last film as a proper directed live action film, was some kind of, I think it's a Yakuza film called Heavenly Sin, starring Omar Sharif.
Oh, okay.
Which I'm now kind of keen.
I'm interested. I am interested.
Yeah. And also the screenwriter for this, Kasahara Kazuo, wrote a whole bunch of films for Kinji Fukusaku, including some of the Battles Without Honor in Humanity Yakuza Papers series as well.
That makes sense. You know, as I said, and also the voice cast in the Japanese version is top notch. I mean, all of them are voices that are connected with huge things. Like one of the, I think Liu Bei or Zhuande is Ashton Ojo's voice, right? Which is Tomorrow's Joe, the boxer. But one of them is Watari Tetsuya.
Yeah, right? He plays Cao Cao.
He plays Cao Cao, yeah. And
for the first 2 seasons, for the first 2 films.
For 2 movies,
the third one, he's replaced by Tsunehiko Watase.
Okay, also a great actor. But Watari Tetsuya, I can't not see him chewing his wife's bones in Graveyard of Honor. That scene is awesome. Anyway, so I mean the voice cast is really strong. It's just the animation itself, and even then that's somewhat remedied, I thought, in the third part. I thought the third part, the animation was a bit slicker, was a bit more shading to it, a bit more realism, and the backgrounds had kind of
I can see Darren's distracted because he's thinking of chewing on your bone a little bit later on.
Well,
when I've driven you into his arms.
Every day I think about that. Every day. Ooh.
All right. Wow.
It's such a little snack, though, isn't it? As opposed to
sweet Jesus. You'll never know the kielbasa that I keep hidden.
No, I won't, because it doesn't exist, and neither do I want it to. I like you petite.
So what do you make? What did you make of it, Darren? What did you make of
my tiny wiener, Darren?
Of SANGOKUSHI?
Oh no! Sorry, we're still talking about Romance of the Three Kingdoms, are we? Okay.
Yeah, for the most part, for what I saw, and you know, I'm less. I've seen less than half of what you two have seen, so that's a factor. Excuse me, but I mean, entertaining enough. And faithful enough. It's doing it. It's definitely trying its best,
and it's got some
gore to get that story told. Got some
gore,
gore, yeah.
Some nice head loppings and arrows and eyes and all that stuff. And like you say, I mean, Zhuande and Zhang Fei and Guan Yu are nicely recognizable, and they all have individual characters, and they've done a good job with that characterization. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of a bit average. But something I want to mention that I do not forgive the filmmakers for is Jiao Chan. Now, what they did with Jiao Chan in this is fucking unforgivable.
What do you object to with the Jiao Chan, Darren?
Well, so you get a little bit of the Jiao Chan story, except in this version of the story, she's some sort of whore vampire that has to be killed by Lu Bu to save the kingdom. So there's this sequence that I remember that reminds me of Tomb of Dracula. Have you seen that? Have you seen that Tomb of Dracula from the 70s?
Right.
Where all of a sudden, instead of having flesh-coloured flesh, like all the other characters have, all of a sudden she's all grey and vampiric. And she just cackles at her misdeeds, and then he just murders her. And then later on, he has a go at the other dancing girls because they can't do the sword dance the same as Diao Chan. And I couldn't quite get away from the logic of the filmmakers. Why would you not include that drama that's already been done very successfully, in film, in literature? Why would you reduce that certainly a Chinese audience would be waiting for? And they must have an eye on export when they're making this,
Yes, yeah.
So why would
I don't know about that. I'm not as sure about the export part. I'm wondering if this might just, because I mean, it's as, in fact, it might even be more beloved, the SANGOKUSHI, because
in Japan,
mushrooming up again and again and again. Every few years, there's a new something or other, video game or draft. They seem kind of slightly obsessed with the Three Kingdoms period.
Okay.
I think even more so maybe than now in China. But anyway, no, I agree with you just saying. And the other thing, to your point as well, just in terms of why do that way? Another thing as well is kind of an interesting, and I'm not quite sure how to, because again, this stuff is so ancient, and like we said, there's different interpretations of it, like how it's, how these things kind of get co-opted as well over the years, and it might be co-opted differently in China as opposed to in Japan, and I often wonder about, for instance, what is the modern Chinese Communist Party's relation to SANGOKUSHI? Who are the heroes, who are the villains, stuff like that. And it was quite interesting in this version, in the Toei animated Japanese version, there's no grey area when it comes to the Yellow Turban rebellions. They're just violent savages, end of, right? There's no, and it's odd because the rest of it is, because I don't think you can tell Romance of the Three Kingdoms without being nuanced, because your three main leads become heroes and villains and interchangeable, and it's baked into the story, right? However, when they did do the Yellow Turban stuff, it's just, nope, they're just, So I thought that was kind of interesting, because I have no idea if that's just a aesthetic choice, or if there's some ancient political machinations behind that interpretation, which the filmmakers might not even be aware of themselves. Do you know what I mean? That kind of stuff.
But surely when you're talking about the Yellow Turban rebellion, that in both the novel and the films, the anime, that happens just right at the start, and that's just something you need to go through to get to the rest of the plot.
Yes.
So you just want to get through it as quickly as possible, therefore they're the villains.
Yes, I suppose.
And also, it's also what makes our three leads the heroes, right? It's what makes Guan Yu and Zhang Fei and Zhuande. It's where they become heroes.
Yes,
right?
because
So
they put it down,
So by putting them in opposition to it, you don't want to immediately confuse matters.
I suppose, but it's just interesting, just because you have this extremely complex story, which is such a kind of grey area, but then you kind of bookend it with more, kind of didactic kind of, no, this was the bad time, this is the good, but we're concentrating on, so it's just interesting to me that it doesn't bleed into the sides either way. There's no concession to, maybe something to be said for the Yellow Turban rebellion. So, and the thing is, I don't even know the history well enough I don't have an opinion myself, but it's just struck me as, oh, okay, there's no room for interpretation there, that particular element.
But one thing that was interesting to me because you guys have read the whole thing. One of the I guess the overarching messages of this is the whole first episode, right, or the whole first third of this whole animated thing is really Juande trying and failing, like, you know, to kind of get anything going. And, you know, he even starts to despair at part with the second one, that like he's basically approaching middle age and nothing he's tried has worked. And what it takes is him seeking out the advice of people smarter than him, right? He's like, I'm a tough warrior, I'm a nice guy, but these two things are not enough. I'm not going to be able to build a lasting, you know, political whatever empire out of this. And so he goes and seeks these two other guys, right? Zhuge Liang and Pang Tong, I think, right? And a big part of that second story is him putting together his dream team of, he's got his two buddies that he's made this you know, pact with in the Peach Garden, and now he needs some guys who are going to be able to actually strategize. And it's for me, it's a bit more nuanced than this kind of story often is, right? That it's and the other thing that really comes through when you watch the whole thing, and if you haven't read the book, is that the historical basis really frustrates some of your narrative expectations, right? Because your narrative expectation is, well, they've made this pact, they're all going to die together in this glorious way, and that completely doesn't happen, right? You know, major spoilers here, but basically all three of them die very much separate from each other at different times and under different circumstances. So much so that the last 45 minutes of the anime features characters who weren't in it at the beginning, right? We've moved on, and now we're just with his lead advisor and, you know, fighting against somebody else who was a descendant of one of the original characters that we began with. And
because I struggle with that in the book, to be honest. I mean, did you struggle with it in the films?
To a certain, for me, because I wasn't expecting it, I was like, wait, they're running. I can see my VLC player's got 45 minutes left of this, but you know, like Juande just died, and he died after Guan Yu and Zhang Fei.
Because as soon as they're gone, it's like, what's the point?
But that's a testament.
And Cho's gone, and
but history doesn't end with specific people. But then I realized, well, you can't end this. This can just go on forever until yesterday.
That's a testament to how more or less faithful it is as well, though, right? That they don't decide to change anything to make it narratively more palatable. They've clearly more or less, apart from a few things here and there, like you said, Zhao Charan maybe being shortchanged. I mean, they did more or less go out of their way to tell an animated SANGOKUSHI for all time. And I think it gets better as it progresses as well. I think their chops got better towards the third part. And again, even though it's not necessarily, I'm not racing out to watch it again. Objectively, I would say it's, you know, very well done. It's not necessarily my idea of a good time, right? But it's very, very good for what it is.
But I think you said it before. I think that if you're looking to get into this is a great framework upon which to hang the various other adaptations that are shorter pieces, because you can start to figure out where they make sense in the overall, you know, because we do get, you know, Zhao Yun shows up, and then we're like, oh, and that's one thing that was very interesting to me, was the whole part where, you know, Juande's wife gets abducted, or whatever. She kind of, and he has to go off and find her, like we saw in that not terribly great movie. But then I don't remember there being a part in the movie where the wife threw herself down a well and killed herself. And even better, when he comes back with the baby, that scene blew my mind. He gives the baby over to Juande, and Juande's like, fuck this baby, and throws it on the ground. And it's just like, what the hell? And then it makes sense in part 3 when the baby turns out to be kind of dim and not very, not living up to the dad's. Well, yeah, you dropped it on its head violently in a fit of rage.
Oh, I'm sad I missed that bit.
That's a great bit. And then...
plus as well, it's just to qualify this as well, though, it's the best that I know of in terms of an animated for all time version from what I've seen. But there's a 1982 version, there's a 1985 version, there's a 1986 version, and the one I'm most keen on, kind of as a possible contender for even more definitive than this one, is the 1991 TV series version,
which is like 52 episodes long. Or
yeah,
whatever, right?
Specifically based on what's his
the
name?
Manga, right?
Mitsutara Masa's manga.
Yeah.
And that specifically is based on the Eiji Yoshikawa novel retelling.
Yes.
And I'm currently reading a Eiji Yoshikawa book at the moment, which is fantastic. And he seems to be a master at retelling. I mean, I can imagine his version of Romance of the Three Kingdoms would be fantastic. So, yeah, so I reserve judgment maybe until I see that version, maybe one day when I have enough time to watch that.
52 episodes?
Yeah, but still, this is, it's a pretty good entry point, I would say, unless you have a bias against that Saturday morning cartoon look, which I totally understand. Fair enough?
Yeah, that works for me. Yeah. It's worth a go, isn't it? It's worth a go. It's completely harmless unless you're Joe-chan.
Yes.
Right.
And now, or if you're UG, because UG gets shortchanged because UG's not in this at all. So there's no weird man antics.
Yeah.
We do get the other one.
Of course, yeah. But not in sight at all, right? Nothing.
No.
And
we do get...
Which is weird.
Yeah, it is weird. And Eugene from Greece isn't in it either.
Nope.
Yeah.
No
or Eugene Trammell from Ninja Final Day.
Or Eugene O'Neill, the famous playwright. He's not in it.
Yeah, Eugene Levy's eyebrows are nowhere to be seen.
No.
So the amount of Eugene's not in you could write a dissertation about.
Yes. Right, we moving on to
the funny thing is, I'll say, I'm closer to the target audience of this than probably either of you.
Children.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Well, my dad did violently throw me to the ground as a child and said, "Fuck this, baby."
And you are a bit dim.
And I'm a bit
as a result.
Yeah. But
did he throw your cock on the ground as well?
Yeah, it got pressed back into my body, hence my inside out.
He threw him down twice. He went, "Fuck this, baby," and then he gave it another go. No, and then it went down again.
Anyway, yes, being maybe slightly more the target audience, I did, I'm a sucker for that, like, manly men, making vows to each other and like manfully weeping when they can't quite keep the vow they made, and then other men being like, "I forgive you, bro," and hugging it out. There's a lot of that in this, and every time I'm like, wiping away a manly tear, and that stuff carries through to the end, and that was the stuff that I probably appreciated the most, because I
wiping away some pre-cum fluid.
Yeah. Anyhow, we're done with anything else to say about it, other than we'll just move past.
It's just if we don't move past
Wang.
it's just gonna go to your cock again. It's it's going that way. So we need to do a turn at the turnpike, a sharp right into the masterpiece.
Thank you, Clyde. Okay, so, well, Clive, do you want to, since you're the master of introductions, would you like to give us an introduction to?
To be honest, Nick, you ruined it. There's no point in me even bothering now. Such a there's no solid foundation on which to build, you see. But I will indulge. And so twat and chocho.
Twitwoo.
And chocho.
And Coco.
Huato, surely. Huato and
Huato and Chow Chow.
Okay.
Is the title of this film as translated into English, at least. This is a mainland film from 1983, directed by Zumo Huang. And so this is specifically about, so the Huatuo character is a physician, right? Played by Chuanlong Zheng, and Hongsheng Huang plays Cao Cao, the warlord.
Now, weirdly, this doctor shows up in the Record of the Three Kingdoms anime we talked about, but not in this part, not dealing with Cao Cao, but dealing with Guan Yu. He's the one who shows up and cuts into Guan Yu's arm and bleeds him at one point. And then we only see him in that one scene.
So this is interesting, actually, because I'm not sure if this more Record of the Three Kingdoms than Romance of the Three Kingdoms. I was wondering as well, because I had a little.
It seems very grounded.
Yeah,
it seems very grounded.
The basic story seems to be more or less true, but I don't remember it specifically from Romance of the Three Kingdoms, right?
No, I don't. There's not a big deal made about it, is it? You know, it's not. There's nothing. You know, I'm sure he's a character in there, but there's nothing about his physical his medical prowess, or you know, or the fact that he's the inventor of anesthetic.
Right,
and basically surgery as well.
Yeah. Because, and plus, as well, I don't remember. It didn't jump out. Oh yeah, I remember. This was the one who was done wrong by and you know was almost executed by a stubborn Cao Cao. But then there was a reprieve. But then he burnt all his. None of that jumped. And again, it just have gone in one ear out the other. But it seems the case with both of you two as well. You don't necessarily.
No.
Like, for example, let's put it another way. Then, if I'd have watched this film, and the warlord character was named anything than Cao Cao, let's imagine he was called Bill Pipes, right? Huan Bill Pipes.
Isn't that the ghost out of Ghostwatch?
No, he's just Pipes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Huan Bill Pipes. I'd watched that film. I don't think I would have actually figured out that it was related to Romance of the Three Kingdoms.
No.
There is a few other name drops but yeah, so you might have thought, why is Bill Pipes fighting with Zhuangde and Sun Quan or whatever?
Other than the names, though, there was nothing.
Right.
Knit it into. I mean, there isn't even anything in. I mean, the film just says, "Oh, this happens after the Battle of Guandu, right?" Is where it starts. But it doesn't give a larger, and again, I suppose it doesn't need to, maybe for a domestic audience, but so
the headaches that he gets and the kind of eventual death of a possible brain tumor, it is in both versions. It's in the cartoon version we just watched, and it's in this.
But it doesn't seem like they've taken an element. For instance, if you were going to break the Romance of the Three Kingdoms down into all the hundreds of different threads in it, it's interesting. This wouldn't necessarily jump out as 10 stories of the Romance of the Three Kingdoms to tell, right? So it's an interesting choice to tell this story. And they did it quite well, I would say. This is quite a good film.
Oh, it's a great film. I think it's a wonderful film. But also, I did a little bit of a Hua-To rabbit hole. And, Hua-To is considered a real historical personage amongst medical professionals,
right?
Certainly in China.
Doogie Howser, MD, for example, spoke very
swears by him. He does.
Yeah, he does.
Swears by him.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, this is, you go on your Wikipedias, you go on your, and all you come across is Chinese medicine and Chinese medical practitioners trying to work out what drugs he was putting in his anesthetic and how he used to do his surgeries. So, I suppose you could compare from a Western standpoint. I suppose you could compare him to Hippocrates, or a slightly more mythological or slightly less certain version of Marie Curie, or he's that sort of figure in Chinese medicine,
right?
So that's an interesting. Because everything else in Romance of the Three Kingdoms we've been reading about is kind of you know, okay, there probably was someone called Cho, there probably was someone called Zwanday, but everything else is embellished. But this actually has a little, Huato seems to have a little bit more of a ring of truth about it.
Right, that's why it makes me think it's more Record of the Three Kingdoms than Romance. And speaking of sending you down rabbit holes, another historic. So just because I was looking it up, it's very difficult to actually find information about this film at all, or any of the people involved.
Yeah.
The only other credit I could is Xue Gong is the actress who plays Huato's wife, right? The one, and you know, there's the whole thing with the son who dies and climbing for the berries. It's all very well done, right? But the other thing, the director Zhou Huang made another film the same year, which seems very much in the same kind of area, called Zhang Heng, which apparently is about a renowned kind of Chinese astronomer and geographer. So that sounds, I mean, on the strength of this, that sounds like a film I would quite like to see. And
for sure, yeah.
Very educational and interesting as well.
Yeah, and you know, I sent a message to you two lads a couple of days ago saying, and this is my entire review of the film, although I've got shitloads more to say about it. You know, my message to you two, you know, the other day on our chat was, why the fuck am I so gripped by a story about the bloke who invented anesthetic in 200 AD? Because that's what it is. It's how he came across the recipe and the tragedy that befell him afterwards. That's what it's about. And
arguably also the tragedy that befell, like, so they make the case for there's a whole alternative branch of medicine that was lost. Because he learned everything, right? Because he didn't want it to get into the wrong hands so it's quite and again, just to go back to earlier when I was talking about, you know, the Yellow Turban rebellions in SANGOKUSHI, I wonder, I mean, and again, so we shouldn't think of countries as having like monolithic kind of socio-political backgrounds as well, right? So, for example, after the wall came down, there was a lot of research done in the Soviet Union, former Soviet Union, and a lot of archives were opened up, and there were a lot of books written by people who could, you know, research stuff, and apparently that's gone back into the dark again. Like some of those archives have suddenly closed again, and so there was a brief window of time where that stuff was more open and people. And I'm wondering if that happens from time to time in China as well, right? So I don't know enough about modern Chinese history, but I'm just thinking, like 1983 China, would a film in which Chow Chow is shown in an incredibly negative light and this Huato character is considered like almost like a martyr figure, would that still be a welcome way of telling this story now?
Yeah, I wondered about the context as well, because really this is a strong argument for pacifism, which is funny to take a chunk out of what is basically an epic, endless war story, and then to tell it in such a way that like that war doesn't seem like fun in any way, shape, or form, right? We have really grisly, grim scenes of like them throwing, you know, still alive people who've had their arms and legs hacked off into the river. I was like, it's very powerful, and you know,
that stuff reminded me of like stuff from like that Nanking Massacre film that they, you know, the Sanford. But yeah, to your point, that's what I mean, Nick. It's interesting, like, again, just instinctively, without knowing the ins and outs of it, this feels, and I might be wrong, this feels like a slight revisionist history in a good revisionist way, as opposed to a bad revision. You know, it feels like a let's tell part of our mythology in a more honest way, right? And I'm just wondering if you could do that now, or if that was only something you could do at a certain win, or maybe it's bollocks, maybe I'm reading too much into it. But that fascinates me. Like, from
I mean, it's well done in terms of like it's always dangerous when you have a you create these two avatars almost, right? You have the one person who argues for one specific, which the doctor is constantly arguing for this position of like we need to take care of everybody and we need to the individual matters and groups matter, poor people matter, and then you've got this statesman or whatever who's got this other idea around what the right thing to do is, right? And his thing is, well, I'm playing the long game. In the long run, I will bring peace and prosperity to the land, and these wars will end. Whereas he's like, no, we need to act now to help people in the moment, because I don't trust that your long game isn't just endless war, right? You seem to be locked into this, which the Romance of the Kingdom, that really is what it is. It's just this like grinding endless series of wars, and you do see it in the other versions we've watched. You do see the poor driven from their homes, cities on fire. You see the toll, but this really brings it home.
Plus, I was just gonna say, there's a lot of recent Chinese political rhetoric under Xi Jinping as well, where he literally says things like, "We are playing the long game of history here," and and this is very much in opposition to that way of thinking. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Adam.
But I think from and again, knowing, I know fuck all about ancient Chinese history. I know even less about modern Chinese history and particularly current politics in China. So that's the caveat right there. However, from a kind of I suppose a literary point of view, then the conflict in this film is, first of all, mutually exclusive necessarily. It's about personality and ego, which I think you can interpret. But it seems to be between discipline and law and the rights of the people.
Right.
And the rights of the people in that context is the right to medical treatment regardless of status, right? Both of which can be very, very easily spun by a communist government, a dictatorship government, however you want to see China. But both ends of that sort of, both ends of that scale, that balancing scale can equally, in my opinion, be utilized, because we're for the people, but we're also for law and order.
Yeah, I mean, they do.
It depends what day of the week it is.
Yeah, I mean,
in any government,
they do give Cao Cao a certain amount of, even though I would say, seems to come down a bit more on the side of Pato, more or less. But there's like a scene, for instance, that scene when they're chucking bodies in the river, and Pato's visibly kind of disgusted and dismayed by his behavior, and Cao Cao has a monologue about, well, yes, but you have the luxury of that because I'm doing what I do, right? And that's the thing, isn't it? It's always that those are all, people have the right to democratically disagree only if that space is carved out for them, right? And you can look at what I'm doing as harsh, but if it wasn't for me, you might already be dead in a ditch, right? So it does balance all that stuff out relatively well, but I still think it's probably more loaded on one side than the other, and it is.
But I think also, particularly the last 15 minutes of the film, all of a sudden, it's about Huato's hubris.
Yes, yeah, right. I agree.
Right. So so Huato, spoilers, Huato has to burn his life's work because he's in prison because he didn't toe the line and apologize. Had he toed the line and apologized and got a pardon, which was offered, then the world, and in his immediate circumstances, the immediate populace would A, have his skills as a medical practitioner, and B, posterity would have had his writings and all of his recipes and treatments.
And more immediately, his wife would have had her husband, and his children would have had their father.
Yeah.
which, you know,
But Cao Cao is still a cunt.
Plus as well.
Yeah.
Plus as well. I mean, you could even argue to the point you use the phrase he has to burn his. Well, there's even that level of he doesn't really have to, right? No one forces him. That's his choice, right, to burn all that stuff.
No,
right?
it's not though. It's not. No.
Oh, it is. It is.
No, he is.
No.
It's unclear. He is told, I think, directly that he's expected to destroy his.
Yeah, any
writings
writings of the prisoner have to be destroyed.
No, I understand that, but there's the line he said, "Well, better I do it than." So, I mean, there's even you could argue that he could have left it up to be burnt by someone else. Right? I just thought that was a very telling. I thought that was supposed to signify something. Maybe not. I don't know, but he actually physically burns it himself, right, as opposed to someone else burning it.
Well, that's because he's a pig-headed fucking arsehole.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah, hubris again. You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's for me. I can't work out, right, because not that much happens in this film. This is quite a slow-paced film.
Yep.
Right, and it's on the face of it. There's a doctor, and he cures people, and because of his morality, he falls out with the local government and the local liege, in this case, Cao Cao, right? And you've got kind of side plots of him discovering this anesthetic, you know, going on hunts to find plants to find these various cures. And it's kind of a really, really mundane kind of plot, really. But the pace and the emotional intensity and the sort of firm but gentle steps the filmmaker
is making.
It's low key. It's really low key, but it's like it is completely mesmerizing.
It does certainly have a cumulative effect, right? Like
it's a true slow burn.
Yeah.
Right. It's really by the time you get to the end, like the final scenes of like his wife crawling along the ground in despair and his children crawling and like the populace wailing, you know, it's really grim.
Oh,
really
and they are sticking the knife in with how cute those kids are.
Oh yeah.
Those are the most adorable children
I
I've
agree.
ever seen on film.
I agree that those kids were ridiculously cute, and to be honest, his wife was also very attractive.
Drag on,
but
yeah.
But I will say, you know, there's it's going to be. He even writes quite a beautiful bit of poetry right at the very end, which I was forced to write down in its entirety.
Yeah.
You were forced
to, as he was forced to.
As he was forced to burn his work, I was forced to record his final words. Bamboo slips turn to ash, the fire groans in fury, like a breath of hate, embers in the straw, kindly acts returned with pain, stepping on the gallows I betrayed not the world, but my Yun King, which is his wife. So his final thoughts are of like, oh shit, I really did screw up. My wife loved me. She asked me to apologize, and I've decided to die rather than be with my wife and surviving children, because he's already lost the one stupid boy who ate a bunch of deathberries.
Like that poet says in Beavis and Butthead, and then, my friend, you die. And then, my friend...
But no, I mean, but there's lots of, in the middle, there's lots of kind of toing and froing between, you know, and it does a really good job of building up the annoyance and the tension between the
part where he's made to like treat Cao Cao's horse rather than the people he wants to treat, like a real like fuck you, buddy.
Moment there, right?
Yeah.
And then his like concubine rather.
It's a very good film. It's a very good film that I'm glad I was made aware of, because I would never have come across this film. And I'm very keen to see this Sang Heng one about the astronomer as well now, because if it's as strong as this, it should be pretty interesting.
And I think Cao Cao's two kids, who also kind of feature two of his 50 kids that feature in this, the young one who eventually dies of the stomach ailment. These are all based on real. Like that's Chao Chong, And then I'm guessing the older one is the one who succeeds, is supposed to succeed Chow Chow after he does die of the brain injury or whatever it is, the brain thing that he's suffering from. Yeah, I mean, Chow Chow does get his comeuppance. There's that element as well, right? That he does bring about his own doom, really, the doom of his favorite child and the doom of himself.
But then there's this thing, isn't there? So you have the elder child. So Chow Chow's elder child is kind of not exactly a firebrand, but definitely has a temper and definitely has ambition and kind of follows after his father in that regard, right? So he's kind of a warlord personality. And then you have the younger child who's gentle. And throughout the course of the film, through various advisors and including Hua Tuo, but generally other advisors, Cho Cho is kind of advised, well, it's all right being a warlord now, but your successor should be someone who is gentle and who
with a light touch,
nurture the populace. And that's the one that dies. And he dies in the most heroic way possible.
By
a little
not
child that can have
shitty
a
brother.
Exactly.
That's a powerful scene.
The
other character I was excited to see was Old One Eye, who is Jin Hao Dun, who is the guy who plucks the arrow out of his face and eats his own eyeball in the first episode of the anime, which I had to look it up and was like, no, that is the Romance of the Three Kingdoms version of the story, is that he pulled the arrow out of his face and was like, this eye was given to me by my parents. And then eats it, which is fantastic.
So there we go. Then we should probably wrap this up.
Because
you're running out of time there, Nick. You're about to be, cut off. So another more Romance of the Three Kingdoms, right? For your delectation.
But I'm dying on this hill. But Hua Tuo and Chow Chow, classic. I don't say like you.
No, I wouldn't go so far as that. I have to admit that in myself. But I very, very good though.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was excellent. And for some reason, it brought to mind Norman Bethune. You guys know who Norman Bethune is?
Is he related to Bill Pipes?
Yes, he is. Yeah, Canadian communist surgeon who went off and fought in the Spanish Civil War, and then went to China. Invented frontline blood transfusion, I guess, or like he used the guy anyway. Made a movie about him, starring Donald Sutherland as he. Pretty well known as being he died in China in 1936, basically fighting with Mao, and was kind of committed to, and then went around China. He reintroduced modern medicine. So basically, he was the successor of this. He was a white Canadian guy who basically, it is in some ways a similar story, and he had this relationship with Mao. So I wondered again, when this was being made, if there was any thought or not to Bethune.
When does that film date from?
The Bethune movie?
It
would be after this for sure. But Bethune would have been known to. He was he was a hero, one of the very few non-Chinese heroes in China, because he allied himself with Mao and practiced medicine. You can Google him.
Cool.
Okay.
Anyway,
right.
Weird place to end.
Well, this is what I'm talking about, Nick. It's just shoddy. But talk us out.
Yeah, it's terrible. Yeah.
No,
I always like to end on a low. Always leave them wanting less. Is my approach.
But what I will say is, in this, and this is where the gaslighter eases off the bullying, because he can tell that the stress point has been reached.
He does look a little fragile, am I?
He does look rough. He does look rough.
Yeah. But no, actually, but to be fair, this, not that I'm blowing our own trumpets, although I'd really like to blow Nick's little trumpet.
Ocarina.
My French horn. Like a zoo. All right.
But no, I mean, this has been quite an information podcast. it's almost as if we've made an educational podcast on all the history and all the actually like moral philosophy and sociology that we covered in the last one.
It's not a bad place to end our Romance of the Three Kingdoms set of things, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder who the real cannibals are.
I'm smoking a pipe if you can't see.
Very small pipe.